Top Gear Tour with Vietnam Motorbike Tours. 10 days, clocking up around 2,000 kilometres, exploring Vietnam. Stunning views, rich culture, great food, and some of the best road riding in the world. Today we wake up in Hue, the former capital of Vietnam. Site of the old royal palace, there are spectacular buildings nearby, but most of us sleep in until it's time to hit that buffet breakfast. And after a good feed, Sir Toby Price says it's time to
see the real Vietnam.
Helmet on!
The plan today? Cruise out through some valleys, then hit the first of many twisty roads through the mountain ranges. Our destination? Khe Sanh. Site of a famous battle during the Vietnam War. Every Australian knows the Khe Sanh song by Jimmy Barnes, and while the song is about a Vietnam vet's life after the war, the weird thing is Aussies weren't actually involved in the Battle of Khe Sanh at all. As usual, we are riding out about the same time as kids head off to school, and their greetings are a great way to start the day. And it seems someone has been encouraging them to high-five Westerners on two wheels. For many of us, our scant knowledge about Vietnam comes from all those war films, so it's refreshing to see all these happy kids and the country heading into a much brighter future than a few decades ago. Plenty of corners coming up today, and I'm fully prepared and alert after a double-strength dose of caffeine. I really can't handle the Vietnam version of coffee, so I'm dipping into my secret stash.
One thing I have learned from bitter experience is I'm a coffee snob, so I have brought my own supplies for this trip. This will keep me a very happy boy.
The views are brilliant through these mountain passes, but of course the helmet cam fails to really capture it. And we barely got to put up the drone at all here, so you'll just have to take my word for it how amazing the scenery is here. It's enough to make you want to dance, Vietnam style. While the seats on these cruises are very comfortable, we still find ourselves getting monkey butt. But just as our asses start to complain, the group pulls over at some scenic spot to have a stretch. I had a chat with a few of the ladies. They were loving it. There's so much you see as you ride along, and while we riders just take quick glances at everything, the pillion passengers are free to soak it all in and even do quite a bit of filming.
Helmet on! Nothing to see!
If they do get sick of the bike, they can always take a break in the Mercedes support van, but hardly anyone ever does. Problem. Our fearless leader up ahead has picked up a puncture.
Just picked up a nail in my tyre that was attached to a bit of electrical wire. All sorted, mate?
Mate, I think you're all sorted. Boys have got your back on the road pretty quickly.
Mate, good to have you as the pit team.
Yeah, mate, I'm the overseer of everything, making sure they're doing a real good job, but...
A fast fix under the strict supervision of Toby Price, and all is good. The handy thing about the support vehicles is the truck carries heaps of spare parts and even a spare bike in case of a major problem. So, no problem. Since we are heading to Khe Sanh, let's look at the war. The French colonised Vietnam for around a century, until Ho Chi Minh and his communist forces defeated the French in the mid-1950s. Then the northern half was controlled by Ho Chi Minh, the southern half by a guy called Diem, a strongly anti-communist leader. There was going to be an election that would unify the country, but Diem started arresting all communist sympathisers and things went to shit quickly from that point on. Now the weird thing is, the USA actually supported Ho Chi Minh and his communist forces with arms and training to defeat the French. And Ho Chi Minh had a great respect for the USA. It too had defeated a colonial power, Britain, to regain its freedom. But unfortunately, foreign policy in the USA was the dominoes theory. Let one country become communist, then all its neighbours will too. So the Vietnam War started. Or, as the Vietnamese call it, the American War. The result? Around 2 million killed during the war. The vast majority were Vietnamese deaths, and sadly, many of them were civilians. Agent Orange destroyed much of the countryside for years, and the Red Cross reported this affected the health of around 1 million Vietnamese. The USA dropped around 7 million tonnes of bombs during the war, about 3 times the total amount of World War II. And our drone operator even found one of the many areas that still bear the crater marks. To make things worse, Agent Orange and bombing also occurred in Cambodia and Laos because the communists had supply lines running through those countries. So 2.7 million tonnes of bombs were dropped on Cambodia without the knowledge of the USA public, causing up to 500,000 deaths, many of them innocent villagers. In Laos, around 2 million cluster bombs were secretly dropped, killing about 50,000 Laotians. The US Air Force estimated that 30% failed to detonate, and unfortunately these cluster bombs are still killing people in Laos today, and mainly children. So here we are, Khe Sanh. This was a key USA Air Force base that came under sustained attack by the North Vietnamese in 1968. Much of the Vietnam War centred around guerrilla warfare, but this was one of those times it was a sustained siege over 6 months. Over 100,000 tonnes of bombs were dropped by US aircraft just in this area, along with 158,000 artillery rounds to defend the base. The North Vietnamese directed mortar, artillery and rocket fire from those distant hills you can see. Eventually, US reinforcements broke through and an evacuation was organised. A lot of equipment was destroyed or removed, but as you can see, some was still left behind. American commanders considered the defence of Khe Sanh a success, but shortly after the siege was lifted, the decision was made to dismantle the base rather than risk similar battles in the future. It's been a sobering day. For some of us, our fathers fought here in Vietnam. But today, and indeed for several decades, the Vietnamese have welcomed Australians and Americans back into Vietnam. And we rode through various towns that had the USA and Vietnam flags flying together. As we rode into our hotel, all the kids from the school next door were keen to say hi and have an impromptu soccer match. You have to admire a people who can not only recover from such a devastating war, but then welcome the descendants of former enemies as friends.